Good evening, just gone 7 PM on Thursday night, the 28th of January 2021. My name's Toby Lepati Mesme, and this is another edition of MesmePolitics. Coming up on tonight's show between now and 7:30, we will be talking about a win regarding workers' rights over the government, the EU vaccine row and the super-nationalism that it's unleashing, Biden's disastrous COVID response, Desmond Swayne and his crankery, but first, Boris Johnson in Scotland. And of course, much more besides. Thank you for joining me. Get in touch in the chat at any point. Please like the video. We are live with all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective via Thursday night. And we open with this. Boris Johnson has said Scottish nationalists should stop talking endlessly about another independence referendum, as the 2014 vote was a once-in-a-generation event, saying, "I don't think the right thing to do is to talk endlessly about another referendum, when I think what the people of this country and the people of Scotland want in particular is to fight this pandemic. I don't see the advantage of getting lost in pointless constitutional wrangling, when after all we had a referendum not so very long ago." The very same people who go on and on about another referendum also said only a few years ago, in 2014, that this was a once-in-a-generation event. I'm inclined to stick with what they said last time. He also said the great benefits of cooperation across the whole of the UK have never been clearer than since the beginning of this pandemic. We have pulled together to defeat the virus, provided $8.6 billion to the Scottish Government to support public services, while also protecting the jobs of more than 930,000 people across Scotland. This all being said as Boris Johnson is visiting Scotland, primarily to visit a vaccination site, but much more besides. Few things off the bat I want to say. First of all, Boris Johnson is not going to be the saviour of the Union. We all know that, but I feel like it needs to be reasserted. Boris Johnson's approval ratings in Scotland make Jeremy Corbyn's UK-wide approval ratings at the end of his tenure as leader, when they'd really tanked, look positively hopeful. In comparison, Boris Johnson is almost universally loathed in Scotland. The average citizen of Scotland would happily throw something at Boris Johnson. He is that despised as a political figure in Scotland, perhaps more than any other British political figure. He's not going to save the Union. His visits to Scotland exacerbate the problem. He is the independence campaign's greatest asset. I feel like, we should all acknowledge that, whether we're unionists or we're supportive of Scottish independence. Let's all just acknowledge the fact that Boris Johnson is really not any sort of help to the Scottish campaign to remain in the Union, or the Westminster Speared campaign to keep Scotland in the Union. Keir Starmer, also being useless at the moment. Nicola Sturgeon basically criticised Johnson for going to Scotland, saying it's not really essential. It sort of sends, I'm not forbidding it, but it sends the wrong messages. It was a very reasonably made point. She did highlight that she believes, he's perfectly welcome there. Just this situation, it's a bit iffy. Keir Starmer came out saying, "I'm with the PM, unequivocal support of him going to Scotland." So completely useless from Keir Starmer. There is no opposition now. That's wonderful. It does strike me as ironic that a lot of centrist factions sort of were like, during Corbyn's time, were like, there's no opposition. No, now there really isn't an opposition. There has been a welcome poll regarding the Labour Party, though, which may surprise you, it may not. It's from YouGov. Labour on 41%, the Tories 37%. Tories minus 2 points this week. Labour up 4. This is a very welcoming poll, a very promising poll, but it is never sustained, right? This happens when a big bad thing happens, like 100,000 deaths, and it goes away again as soon as people forget, as the news cycle moves on. It's not sustainable, and Labour are doing nothing to sustain that momentum. So in many ways, it's effectively meaningless in all but title. A lot of condescension from unionists as well during this debate. I've heard a lot of, oh, we pay for everything. They've got sort of repurposing the welfare scroungers rhetoric, but throwing it just at the entire country of Scotland. Being condescending and talking down to Scottish people. I mean, again, why do you think that's going to sustain the case for the UK? The more you tell Scottish people you can't make it on your own, the more they're going to go and make it quite well on their own, I'm certain. Ridiculous. England and Scotland are being pulled apart politically. And in many ways, that's because of England. Because England has embraced right-wing politics for too long. Scotland has been shafted by successive Tory governments and ignored at best by successive Labour governments. Why wouldn't they want to leave? What are they getting out of this? Really, what are they? They can make it on their own. Let's have a listen to this. So, Desmond Swain is in trouble, Tory MP. Have a listen to this from Sky News.
Conservative MP Sir Desmond Swain in November last year speaking to Save Our Rights UK, a group that's advanced false claims about the COVID vaccine and organised anti-lockdown protests. The topic of discussion, the risk posed by the virus to the NHS.
But it seems to be a manageable risk, particularly given the way that figures appear to have been manipulated. We are told that there is a deadly pandemic proceeding at the moment. That is difficult to reconcile with...
There is no evidence of figures being manipulated, and at the time of this interview, deaths were 14% above the 5-year average.
So bizarre. Conservative Party is under growing pressure to discipline Sir Desmond Swain. He's a sir. That tells you a lot, doesn't it? Backbench Tory MP after he refused to back down from those baseless claims. And he refused to apologise today after the emergence of that November interview in which he urged a fringe coronavirus deniers group that has suggested the pandemic could be a hoax to persist in protesting against the lockdown. The Save Our Rights UK group, if you think I'm being unreasonable about this, has also published videos promoting the theories of David Icke, him, and Piers Corbyn, as well as an interview in which it is claimed that the coronavirus is linked to the QAnon conspiracy and that Madonna revealed her awareness of the pandemic at the 2019 Eurovision Song Contest. In a Sky News interview on Thursday, Swain said that the situation has changed completely with the new variant, that his remarks were perfectly legitimate at the time, and after facing no clear sanction from his party over the interview, he told Talk Radio's Julia Hartley-Brewer, "We are getting very close to thought crime here, aren't we?" Angela Rayner says the Conservatives must act. They must intervene urgently, condemn these comments, and take action, because it is, frankly, dangerous. By the way, if you want to get involved throughout the show at any point, please do in the chat. So, he has got to go. I think he should have the whip removed. Completely dangerous. Spouting dangerous nonsense. At the same time, he has the right to say whatever he wants to say. That does not mean he should be allowed in a mainstream political party. If the Conservative Party thinks what he's saying is in tune with their values, so be it. But I would hope it's not. And while we're on the broader topic of Scotland, I want you to have a little listen to something. This is, my respect for Nicola Sturgeon really went up after this. This is a statement from her on trans rights.
This is a message from me as SNP leader on the issue of transphobia. I don't have much time for anything other than the fight against COVID right now, but on some days, silence is not an option. This message wasn't planned, it's not scripted, I haven't consulted with armies of advisors. That might be obvious. But what you're about to hear comes from my heart. Over the course of the day, I've heard reports of mainly young people in significant numbers leaving the SNP. I know many of you personally. I consider you friends. I've campaigned alongside you. You're a credit to our party and our country. It grieves me deeply that you've reached this conclusion after much soul-searching, because you consider at this stage the SNP not to be a safe, tolerant or welcoming place for trans people. That's not acceptable to me. As SNP leader, I will do everything I can to change that impression and persuade all of you that the SNP is your party and that you should come home where you belong. Yes, we have differences of opinion on gender recognition reform. We should debate them openly and respectfully, but no debate can be a cover for transphobia. Trans people have as much right as any of us to be safe, secure and valued for who they are. Transphobia is wrong and we must treat it with the zero tolerance we treat racism or homophobia. Those are the principles I want to characterise the SNP and the country that I am privileged to lead. They're also the principles and values that I want to underpin the independent Scotland I've spent my whole life campaigning for. I don't support that as an end in itself, but as a means to a better, fairer, more just Scotland. Now, some will criticise this message, say it doesn't go far enough, or that the words are hollow unless we prove we mean them. I'm determined we will. No doubt others will accuse me of being woke. I don't care. Sometimes, particularly as a leader, it's vital to speak up for what is right and against injustice. That is why I'm posting this message, and I'm grateful to you for listening.
Really good from Nicola Sturgeon there. Of course, not all of it was perfect, but I think she deserves props for that, because it does send a message, and it's pissing off a lot of the people you'd hope would be pissed off. It's pissing off sort of the British turfery, if you like, and that would indicate she's probably hit the right note. Over to the United States and Biden's response to coronavirus. So this is from Jacobin, Branko Marketic in Jacobin. I'll read you a little bit of it here. Where is it? Here you go. So towards the end of his apotheosis last week, President Joe Biden told the nation, as he's insisted since before he even ran, that there isn't anything we can't do if we do it together. Anything, it seems, except doing the main thing that would save tens, if not hundreds of thousands of lives from the pandemic in the coming months. While Trump was president, the US and the world consensus among scientists and liberals was that the only way to stop the rampaging coronavirus, particularly when it is surging out of control as it had been for months in the United States and in a globally unprecedented way, was a temporary national stay-at-home order. That approach is still the global consensus, but has simply ceased to exist in US political discourse since November. It would run into a huge amount of roadblocks. No one thinks it would be easy, but given that this was the one overriding issue Biden was arguably elected to deal with, and given the scale of loss of life expected in the near future, it's surely worth trying. On last Friday, he said, "There's nothing we can do to change the trajectory of the pandemic in the next several months. The virus is surging, with 400,000 dead, expected to reach well over 600,000. A day earlier, he'd assured the public that 500,000 Americans would be dead by February alone. And I'll just quote this from the article. This is, to put it mildly, stunning. The number of 400,000 dead under Trump was already a near incomprehensible number, one the former president was deservedly and widely pilloried for, and eventually thrown out of office over. The news in May that Trump's inaction early on in the pandemic caused at least 36,000 needless deaths alone was widely and rightly pointed to as a prime example of his recklessness. Now, Biden is blithely admitting that within the first few months of his presidency, there's nothing we can do. That's ridiculous. It's shameful. It proves that these people are not a sufficient replacement for the Republicans, right? Let's look at this. There is a lockdown needed. The US needs a lockdown. The virus is spreading rampant. Variants are all over the place. No one has a clear idea of what the strategy is. And currently, Biden's coronavirus response is even worse than Boris Johnson's coronavirus response, particularly now that that is slowly getting back on the rails. I can't really put into words, we hold these people to different standards. But Joe Biden is currently more lockdown skeptic and more laissez-faire about the virus than any leader in Europe, or at least in Western Europe, that I can think of. And certainly here as well. It's really bad. Words is great. He says the right things. But there's nothing we can do. What sort of leadership is that? That's Trump-level leadership. And we need to see a whole lot better than that. But then again, Joe Biden was always a shockingly, tragically mediocre candidate for President of the United States, and he will be a shockingly mediocre president, with potentially the legacy of hundreds of thousands of deaths on his hand, putting him, in the same bracket as Trump. The contrast will help him, with Trump just because he looks more competent. That'll infinitely help him. And alongside that, the media is literally a lapdog for the Democrats now, completely passive. So they're not going to hold him to account. They should be holding him to account with as much passion and gusto as they did during the Trump era. But no, not even a smidge of that. Having a look at his approval ratings, the average is currently 54% approve, 35% disapprove. It ranges from one poll 49-48, and another poll 59-32. We're talking in favour of approve, disapprove, and another poll 63-37. The ratings are solid. Overall, they should be a lot higher. They could go higher during COVID just because people, the whole rally around the flag effect. This is evidence that there is no more presidential honeymoon, right? Obama had it. Trump didn't have it, though. Biden now doesn't have it either. No huge slope that they come down from. The peril of that is, well, this would be a good rating for the middle of a presidency. Right now, there is a really short fall ahead. It only goes down from here. And 2 years in, 4 years in, that could be looking really bad as a rating because, it only needs to fall a bit to not be looking too good. It looks okay now, but it can really go in a negative direction a lot quicker than you'd think. That would be my analysis of the situation. Here's Joe Biden talking about tackling the existential threat of climate change, and this was yesterday.
In my view, we've already waited too long to deal with this climate crisis. We can't wait any longer. We see it with our own eyes, we feel it, we know it in our bones, and it's time to act. And I might note parenthetically, if you notice, the attitude of the American people toward greater impetus on focusing on climate change and doing something about it has increased across the board, Democrat, Republican, Independent. That's why I'm signing today an executive order to supercharge our administration's ambitious plan to confront the existential threat of climate change. It is an existential threat. Dealing with this existential threat to the planet and increasing our economic growth and prosperity are one and the same. When I think of climate change, and the answers to it, I think of jobs. A key plank of our Build Back Better recovery plan is building a modern, resilient climate infrastructure and clean energy future that will create millions of good-paying union jobs. We're going to take money and invest it in clean energy jobs in America. Millions of jobs in wind, solar, and carbon capture. In fact, today's action is going to help us increase renewable energy production from offshore wind and meet our obligation to be good stewards of our public lands. It establishes a new, modern-day civilian climate corps that I called for when I was campaigning to heal our public lands and make us less vulnerable to wildfires and floods. Our plans are ambitious, but we are America. We're bold. We're unwavering in the pursuit of jobs and innovation, science and discovery. We can do this. We must do this, and we will do this.
That's Joe Biden there, talking about tackling climate change. All I really have to say on that is, so far we've heard a lot of the right words. We've seen some positive step changes away from the orthodoxies of the Trump era, but it's, at the moment, toothless. There's no legislation. As Chuck Schumer said the other day, legislation needs to be the North Star. And we need to see much, much more before I'll say this is good. The honeymoon in my brain for this administration has already died. It lasted about 48 hours, where I was giving them the benefit of the doubt. Only 48 hours. Let's really start hammering them now and push for things, right? Another sort of observation I wanted to bring to you is I think Chuck Schumer, out of Biden, Pelosi, Schumer, the terrible trio, the terrible trifecta in control of unified democratic government right now in America. Schumer is possibly, because he wasn't associated with the huge failings of 2008, 2009, 2010 in terms of Democrats not delivering, has a little bit of a better perspective on it. Still in the pocket of Wall Street, but possibly the lesser evil out of those three individuals. Maybe I'm wrong if you think his record's worse than those two, but it's quite hard to find a record worse than Pelosi and Biden. So he's not fighting against much. and he is certainly not up to the job. We should be seeing like someone like Elizabeth Warren maybe in that role, but they're all not up for the job. Let's be realistic. The impeachment proceedings are going forward. Let's have a listen to Rand Paul of Kentucky, the libertarian, very sort of right-wing libertarian Republican senator, trying to dismiss, as 45 Republican senators vote to dismiss the impeachment of Donald Trump, as all the details are being brought forward to the Senate.
Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution says, the President, Vice President, and all civil officers of the United States shall be removed from office on impeachment for and conviction of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Article 1, Section 3, Clause 6 states, when the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside. As of noon last Wednesday, Donald Trump holds none of the positions listed in the Constitution. He is a private citizen. The presiding officer is not the Chief Justice, nor does he claim to be. His presence and the Chief Justice's absence demonstrate that this is not a trial of the President, but of a private citizen. Therefore, I make a point of order that this proceeding, which would try a private citizen and not a president, a vice president, or civil officer, violates the Constitution and is not in order.
And Majority Leader Schumer responding to that.
So again, by constitutional text, precedent, and common basic sense, it is clearly and certainly constitutional to hold a trial for a former official. Former President Trump committed, in the view of many, including myself, the gravest offense ever committed by a president of the United States.
Okay, so that's going on ahead. It doesn't look like it's going to get anywhere other than being good TV. And back over to Britain, where millions of doses of vaccines could be blocked from entering Britain by the EU within days as part of Brussels' response to a shortage of doses among its member states. The European Commission said a new authorization mechanism would be established to give national regulators the power to refuse vaccine exports. The development will raise concerns over the continued flow of the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, for which the UK has a 40 million dose order. An official conceded there is a possibility on certain circumstances not to allow the export to come forward. Alright, let's start from the top. So, vaccine nationalism is the ultimate scourge above all else, wherever it comes from. We should not be hoarding these things. We should be equitably distributing them free of charge around the world, particularly to poorer countries. One infection of coronavirus anywhere in the world is an injury to all of us, and it means none of us can enjoy normal life, no matter how isolated we are. Isolation is not the answer here. It is a short-term solution. We have to eradicate this virus from the planet. And doing that, we have to provide an equitable allocation of resources for the planet. This is where capitalism really doesn't help you in dealing with such a situation. The EU are posturing like idiots. They're complaining. They're unleashing some sort of super nationalism where they want to create like one big protectionist bloc of Europe. So instead of one country being protectionist and stupid, it's going to be one union of countries being protectionist and stupid. It's silly, and it shows one of the many reasons that I hold that organisation in contempt for its it's the Fortress Europe mentality, basically. It's not British nationalism, which is equally bad. It's just Euro nationalism. The shiny nationalism. No. The UK did well in terms of sourcing vaccines. There are a few caveats, such as they did sign things that weren't scrutinised very well in terms of deals with pharma companies. Vaccines, great, but in terms of where the liability lies and where all the different sort of mechanisms of accountability lie, they may have ceded too much ground to the vaccine companies themselves, the pharma companies. But then again, those are the sort of things that can change. Broadly, they did well on sourcing the vaccines very well. And if we do have surplus supply, which it looks like we will, we do need to share our supply around the world, absolutely. And if Europe can't get vaccines, that includes Europe. But the EU is basically trying to impose some weird variant of super nationalism. And yeah, really not good. A welcome development, a controversial review into how EU employment rights protections could be changed post-Brexit is no longer going ahead. Kwasi Kwarteng on Peston said so the review is no longer happening within the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. I made it very, very clear to officials in the department that we're not interested in watering down workers' rights. I can't have been more clear about this on a number of occasions. I've said repeatedly that Brexit gives us an opportunity to have higher standards and a higher growth economy, and that's what officials in the department are 100% focused on. Also tweeting the other day, we are not going to lower the standards of workers' rights. We want to protect and enhance workers' rights, not row back on them. This is after initial media reports suggested the review would consider proposals including an end to the 48-hour minimum working week, changes to rules about breaks at work, removing overtime pay when calculating certain holiday pay entitlements, and getting rid of the current requirement for businesses to log information about daily working hours to save on, quote, administrative costs. Kwasi Kwarteng and his faction of the Conservative Party do hold really dangerous dogmatic views with no idea of the consequences that they would inflict upon everyday working people. They sit in their ivory towers. You know, they call the left out of touch or ideological. These people really do live in a fairyland, right? And that, you know, that's what the Britannia Unchained text was about. Pressure and shaming of the government seems to have worked here. It's not stopped them completely. It's held them in their tracks. This is what we have to do, fighting the terrain for a high wage, high standards, high growth, post-Brexit Britain. That's what we have to fight for. That's not what the government wants, but if they think it will politically hurt them, they won't do it. That's why we've got to fight for it. And a quick look. This is James Schneider, former Corbyn spokesman, criticising Labour's current strategy, talking to BBC Politics Live.
Westminster voting intention, this is YouGov from today, shows Labour on 41%, the Conservatives on 37%. And this is a slightly earlier poll, which actually puts the Conservatives ahead. This is a Delta poll. Conservatives on 41% and Labour on 39%. You could argue sort of fairly level pegging and certainly within the margin of error. Does that surprise you, James?
Not particularly. I mean, I think that the government has handled the pandemic terribly, and therefore Labour should be doing better, and the Conservatives should be doing worse. And I also think they're going to get a bigger vaccine bounce, and so that gap could widen. I think that part of the reason is that the Labour Party has been a bit reluctant in how it criticises the government and which things that it highlights, and it's generally been too technical and not political enough, and hasn't done enough of setting out what an alternative would be, so it can look a bit like it's sniping from the sidelines without anything to say. And but there is lots of time still for the party to pull itself together and to put forward, clearly what is our alternative for the country. How are we going to put the interests of the many ahead of the interests of the few? And there's still time for Keir and the rest of the team to do that.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Always liked James Schneider. We'll close you off with Ed Miliband having a go at Kwasi Kwarteng. A bit before this U-turn in the House of Commons. Here you go. Or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't want to play. Come on. The people want Edward. Edward. The people want Edward Miliband. Give him to us.
In the world. To paraphrase one of his predecessors, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the noble Lord Heseltine, the right honourable gentleman has advocated cutting workers' rights before breakfast, lunch and dinner, and woke up in the morning and wrote another pamphlet advocating the cutting of workers' rights. And now he expects us to believe, I'm not going to give way, and now he expects us to believe he's had a road to Damascus conversion. He's jumped all his previous beliefs. He's gone, if you like, from Britannia Unchained to Workers of the World Unite. You have nothing to lose but your chains. From blue Kwasi to red.
Very good. Okay, that is it for MesmePolitics. Please like the video and subscribe. Tell your friends, get notifications on. I've been Toby Lepetti Mesme. Thank you for joining us. Back same time, same place, tomorrow. please follow me on Twitter at TobyJoshuaUK. Email tobyjoshua2004@gmail.com or follow me on Medium at TobyJoshuaPolitics for twice daily 2-minute reads. We appreciate you joining us and we'll be back for your Friday evening. Have a great Friday. Let's make it a good last day of the week. Let's make it a good last day of the week.